Welcome back to Gatecrashers. This week we're joined by Isaac Goodhart, the artist for Victor and Nora, a Gotham Love Story. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited that you're here. I got to read the book yesterday and immediately went out and pre-ordered my copy. I got to say, as a longtime Mr. Freeze and Nora fan, this book is kind of the definite other than Heart of Ice from the animated series.
That is the highest praise that we could ever hope for. So thank you so much. I mean, obviously working on this book, and we're probably around the same age, right? I grew up loving Mr. Freeze and Heart of Ice, Batman, the animated series. So to get that compliment is very kind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time talking about Mr. Freeze. So I've just been so pumped for this book, and anyone who even cares about Batman or Mr. Freeze will 100% love this.
What were your favorite Mr. Freeze stories? Let's compare notes.
So this is going to be kind of controversial. I don't think Mr. Freeze has a definite comic story. I don't think he has anything definitive that will ever match up to Heart of Ice. And the reason for that is I think after the fact of tragedy and learning why he's fighting for what he is, he starts to diminish in returns. So every time you use Mr. Freeze, he becomes more of a villain rather than a tragedy.
Very interesting. Okay.
What is
that's I love a lot of the recent takes on Mr. Freeze. So I'm going to jump around to different media. Tom King and Lee Weeks recently did a Mr. Freeze story, which was more about Bruce Wayne and his double life. And Mr. Freeze was like a supporting character in that. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was great. Go ahead.
You know what? Let's talk about that. Did you think in that story Mr. Freeze was used because he is kind of the foil that he is searching for something that Batman just lost? So Batman took his aggression out on him because all he's been doing is searching for his love that he lost.
Yeah, it was exactly my interpretation. Yeah. But is your question could he have been a different character? Is that what you're asking?
No, do you think the impact of Mr. Freeze in just being in that story and a side character was more impactful if they used someone like the Riddler? Just
interesting. Yeah. I never thought about it that way, but let's go down this road. It's if Mr. Freeze is representative of something that Batman, almost like a cautionary tale, right? Because for those who haven't read the book, the Tom King series, spoiler alert, he gets stood up at the altar by Catwoman, and so he loses the love of his life. So the parallel with Mr. Freeze, and the reason why Mr. Freeze had to be the bad guy in that story, or the antagonist in that story, is because Batman saw himself in Freeze. He projected himself in this person and ran the danger of being a villain, right? So that was what he was rectifying in court. I think that's a really interesting interpretation, which is all there. And of course, I didn't think about it then. What do you think?
I absolutely that's what I read in the story. I have to be clear. I'm a huge Tom King fan, so. I think it was the only follow-up to what happened. I didn't want to see a story where Batman tries to chase after her, because that's kind of what Mr. Freeze has done his whole life, and look where it's got him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the best part about the rogues, right? Is that Batman is always only a hair away from being any of these villains. And that's what's so interesting about the dynamic between these bad guys and Batman is that they're all a version of Bruce Wayne Batman, right? So that's what draws people to Mr. Freeze. You know, that's what draws me to the character. And also, I mean, I read, like, full disclosure, I read that series, that story arc, because Lee Weeks is just the greatest artist of our generation, you know? Like, I mean, he's incredible, and I'll follow him no matter where he goes. So he was on that awesome storyline, and I had to pick it up.
Yeah. What were your other your definite Mr. Freeze stories?
You know, I don't know about definite. I've read a lot growing up, of course, but recently there's been some really good stories. So Nora Freeze got a lot of characterization in the Harley Quinn cartoon on HBO Max, and she was a lot of fun there. And that show is just generally very good. You know, I recommend that to everyone, comic fan or not. I think that show's awesome and really hilarious. She got a lot of characterization in Gotham, the live action TV show, which I think is highly underrated. And I thought that the Mr. Freeze, Nora Freeze stuff was done really well. You know, I'm always looking for Nora Freeze characterization, and so I really appreciate it when she's got, you know, dialogue and a backstory and goals. And so when I see that in media, which was also done with Doug Mahnke, if I'm pronouncing his name right, in Detective Comics recently too. And that was a lot of fun. And that was a much different take than ours, of course. That was Nora Freeze being unfrozen and becoming a villain. So a very interesting take. But ours was our take on Mr. Freeze, because it's a prequel, essentially. We got to do who she was before she was frozen. So that was always the hook. That was always what we wanted to do. Most Nora Freeze stories. And if I'm missing anything, please correct me. And if you're listening, please tweet at me. I'm at Isaac Goodhart. I haven't found a lot of Nora Freeze before she was frozen. I've only found stories where she is the motivation for Victor. So we definitely wanted to do a story where she's as important as Victor, you know, and she gets as much quote unquote screen time as Victor. So that was our pitch, and that's what our story is.
And I can confirm that is 100% what you did. So this is the first time we've ever broken. We usually start with a very important question, but I think Mr. Freeze supersedes that to me. So I gotta follow that up with some hard-hitting journalism and ask you,
do it.
What's your favorite sandwich?
Oh my gosh. This is very indeed hard-hitting. 100%, no equivocation, a Reubens sandwich. Hotter the better. The messier the better. That is probably the most unhealthy sandwich that you could possibly get, and it is my favorite. Have you answered this question on your podcast?
Me?
Yourself?
I think a couple people have asked me. I have a sandwich in North Jersey that is named after me because I worked at a deli. I can tell you about it afterwards. I don't want to make my listeners hear that the 1,000th time. It's a chicken cutlet sandwich with some extras. But I do agree on Reubens. There's a really good place in Philly in the Reading Terminal that makes a pretty good one. But I've never gotten to have one. I know there's a place in New York that's like groundbreaking for Reubens.
I'm going to have to go there. I'm actually in North Jersey, so you're going to have to tell me what this, where I can get the Dan McMahon sandwich.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into your story. And I think everyone who's listening knows one thing about Mr. Freeze. So just how important were ice puns to this story?
There's got to be a couple of ice puns in there. I'm pretty sure that there are ice puns. It's so funny. For a lot of people, like a lot of people in my girlfriend's family, for example, when they would ask me what I'm working on, I would tell them about Mr. Freeze. Their points of reference are either Batman 69, the television show, and Batman and Robin, right?
Yeah.
Batman and Robin is the movie.
Yep.
And those two Batman TV show movies, they're very pun heavy, and I love them for that reason. I think puns were not at the forefront of our minds for this, but at the same time, the big theme of our story is fire and ice. So Victor has a heart of ice, and the tagline is, can Nora melt his frozen heart? So there's a big old pun in our tagline, which you can see in posters at a comic book store near you. But that was not the biggest thing for us, though. I do love Arnold Schwarzenegger's take on the character. Gotta love him.
And you said one of the epitomes of the book is the fire and ice. I noticed in the opening of the story, there's lines about how the memories will end in fire, ice. Was there any reference to the Robert Frost poem "Fire and Ice" in the creation of the story?
Oh wow, that is a deep cut question for someone much more intelligent than me. Lauren is a brilliant writer, and I would not be surprised if that was very much in the forefront of her mind. There are a lot of references and allusions to other literary works in our book, some overt and some very subtle. And I can tell you that Lauren is a brilliant, well-read writer, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is very much the case.
So I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit, but as you said, there are a lot of allusions in this book, and you do make beautiful use of your own art to make allusions to other things. So there's a couple pages throughout the story that allude other styles of artist and art itself. What were your intentions with those pages?
Thank you for that question. I love talking about this because this is all very new for me. I'm one of those comic book artists who got into the industry, and my whole thing was, I want to be the best at this kind of thing, this department, right? Which is essentially superhero type stories. After a lot of twists and turns, no one's comic book career goes exactly according to plan. And when I got to DC, there was a new thing called the DCYA line, which was perfect for me at the time because I grew up reading, Brian Michael Bendis comics. I grew up reading Runaway. So this was exactly the place I wanted to be. But, I want to draw very much in my typical style. What Lauren did in the script, and there was no discussion about this beforehand, but she had different styles put in the script. She asked me to draw in a different style. So she asked for an Edward Gorey style and an old cartoon style, I believe. So, and I got the script in chunks. So I got the first third of the script, and I started working on that as Lauren was writing the second two parts of the script, the second two acts. And so in the first act, she asked me to draw in this Edward Gorey style. I believe I'm getting that name right. Listeners can Google to fact check me. And I don't know Edward Gorey. So I had to look him up, and I saw that in my research, I saw that Tim Burton was very heavily inspired by Edward Gorey. So I sort of combined the two styles. So there is a sequence where Victor and Nora, who are both obsessed with death for very different reasons, and you'll see when you read the book why they're obsessed with death and what their different perspectives on death are. And as we were drawing the sequence where they're talking about their favorite ways to die, Lauren wanted to do an Edward Gorey thing, and then I came back with Victor and Nora, and the style that we landed on, or that I landed on to draw this sequence is sort of a combination of both. And so I grew up loving Nightmare Before Christmas and A Corpse Bride, and so I drew with sort of those contours, with those figure and character designs, and then I had the Edward Gorey hatching and cross-hatching rendering. So I love talking about that because that is what made our collaboration, mine and Lauren, so strong, that she could say, I was thinking the sequence would be in this style, and then I could come back to Lauren and say, well, what if we did it in this style? And so she's bringing her background and what she's connected to, and then I'm bringing what I'm connected to and have emotional resonance to, and we're creating this new thing in this new style. So Tim Burton had a very pen and ink watercolor style. Edward Gorey had a very almost crude, which is not to say that it wasn't beautiful and well drawn style. And so we combined it for that scene. And then there's another sequence where there are there's like a fallout shelter animated style, which I believe was Lauren's. This is now a year and a half ago when I started this. So I think so. That was all Lauren who asked for that, and I love that sequence. And so I think we had those two fantasy sequences in different styles in that first part. And I think that was sort of us just testing the waters to see if I could handle that, Mm-hmm. And then because we did a little bit of that in Under the Moon, A Catwoman Tale, which was our first collaboration, our first project. So in the second and third part, I think that Lauren wanted to just double down on that, and then so she asked for more different styles because it worked, and then it kept working, and then we just kept drawing in these different styles, and then I'm very competitive with myself. I think that a lot of comic book creators are, and so I wanted to keep drawing new and trying different stuff and different styles, and I'm looking, and Lauren and I are going back and forth in email like, oh, what about this guy? What about this guy? And so we ended up with like an Eric Carle style, who's famous for The Very Hungry Caterpillar. We thought that would be very appropriate. I used my grandma as an artist. She did a lot of the portraiture work in the 60s, and I used like her watercolor set for that scene, which was really nice. And I started doing a lot of pen and ink drawing too. So I am a digital artist, which you were very kind enough to talk about in your Twitter thread yesterday, but there are some mixed media pages further into the book. The Eric Carle page, a lot of the scenes with the bird of portent, we're calling him, which is this hallucination that sort of torments and harasses Nora. He's called the bird of portent. That was Lauren's name for the bird. So in the script, she would always have BOP, which I would always read as birds of prey, but it's bird of portent in our script. Very serious name, very serious character.
So I've got so many different ways to go from this question. I want to see if I can get them all kind of organized. First, I don't want to ruin the page, but you do a sort of romance style page, like a romance comic style page, which blew me away because it references something very funny, and I want listeners to see it for themselves. But like that page is like, whew, because not a lot of people think of comics as like a media to tell romance stories anymore, which it used to be very big.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I know the detail that you're excited about because I'm a big comic book fan. I'm a big comic book history fan. Like, I love documentaries about the history of comics. I love trivia about what was DC Comics called before they were DC. What does DC stand for? What was Marvel before they were called Marvel? I love all that kind of trivia. So anytime there's an opportunity to put in some of that kind of stuff, then I love it, and I'm always looking for an opportunity to throw in a couple of Easter eggs. So Under the Moon, A Catwoman Tale had a ton of Easter eggs. Victor and Nora has less so, but you will find them if you're an eagle-eyed reader. You'll find a lot of nods to the history of Victor Fries, the history of Batman, and the history of comics at large.
There's one in a Bird of Portent scene that I had to catch myself because I saw it and I was like, oh man, that's going to hurt later. So with doing a young adult style OGN like this with your art, and then doing a more serial style comic with your Aquaman Girls Night Out, what was your approach? How did you approach these two different, I guess, mediums of comic? Like, how did you approach doing a short story like that compared to a fully realized original graphic novel?
This is going to be a very disappointing answer for you and your listeners, but the truth is very little, honestly. If I had to say one thing, I'll say two things about that. With the young readers line, the young adult line of books, there's a lot less comparison. And I'm just talking about what's going on in my own maniac brain, when I'm working on Mera or Wonder Woman or Zatanna, I'm looking at how Adam Hughes draws these characters. I'm looking at how Joelle Jones draws Catwoman, how the great artists of the industry draw the character that I'm about to start working on. And it's very intimidating. It's extraordinarily intimidating. Like, let me just be all the way real with you right now. It's almost debilitating. After a while, because you have crushing deadlines, you just have to get it together to get it done on time. But when you do something like Victor and Nora Under the Moon, you get to establish these characters your way, and you have more space to make this personal and to put your own spin on it and not have any influence, because I'm the first guy to draw teenage Victor Fries. I'm the first guy to draw Nora in this depiction, and I can design them in the clothes that I think these characters would wear based on Lauren's very new, very novel approach to these characters, and I can put more of myself into these characters, or I can base Nora more on my girlfriend Danielle. I can do that, and when you're working on an established character like Mera or Tula or Zatanna, there is a history. There's a little bit more adherence to what these characters are supposed to look like, what's been established. But on Victor and Nora on Under the Moon, I'm establishing, I get to build it sort of from the ground up, which is very, very exciting. And in a lot of ways, more personal. So you're getting a more personal version of what my art is with Victor and Nora, which is not to say one is better than the other. I certainly don't prefer one over the other. They're very different types of projects. As far as art approach, which I think is more of what you were asking, I just answered a question that you didn't ask, but more to your question specifically, in Victor and Nora, maybe the acting is a little broader. Maybe the expressions are sold a little bigger. I can sell a joke bigger. I can play moments more broad, and so you'll see a lot of that in this. And that also goes with working with Lauren, who likes to balance very dark, serious moments with very light and sweet moments. So there is a little bit of a change, but it's not as conscious as you might think. I'm still drawing in a way that feels natural and honest.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, no, that answer was 20 times better than I set up the question as, so I'm very excited about that. So with you being able to break the ice on what these characters looked like as teenagers.
That is a solid pun. How important are ice puns for you in this interview? Well done, sir.
Any chance I get, I rated CBR, and I'm an editor over there, and I was talking to my editor earlier. I was supposed to write a review on this book, but I was like, I'm too close to it. Like no matter if this book was bad or good, I would have given it 100% because I love these characters. But
oh my God, hilarious.
I was talking to him and I was like, hey, I'll edit this later, but I'm 100% going to put an ice pun in here somewhere. Just a heads up. So, yeah.
Required.
And being this character personal to you, what influenced their looks as teenagers? What about their personalities did you want to come through in the way they dressed, the way they looked?
Yeah, so we wanted to create just characters. You know, we always knew that Nora was this angelic beauty, and that we knew from what Paul Dini and Bruce Timm. That's how they portrayed the character. She's this angelic beauty, inside and out. You know, her personality is the most pure, the most endearing, the sweetest person in the world, and that's reflected externally, you know. So that was my approach going in. That's what I thought. I just wanted to, as an artist and as someone who grew up loving that story as much as you did, I wanted to continue that tradition, that story, that the way that they established those characters, and who is the person that Nora falls in love with, you know. So that's my feeling with that. Nora has always been beautiful. She's always been very sweet. She's always been very charismatic. And so logic would dictate that so is Victor. You know, we know him as this person who looks the way that he does, and his skin is a different color, and he's bald, and he's menacing, and he's villainous. But I would argue that trauma and a lifetime of villainy and fighting Batman has sort of altered his personality and his appearance. So what did he look like when he was a teenager? You know, I think that he looked a lot different. I think that he was a lot sweeter, and I think that he was a lot more innocent before these horrible events started taking over. So that was my approach with that. And I did have a lot of back and forth with these characters and Lauren, the same way that we did with Catwoman when we worked on Under the Moon. So there were a lot of different hairstyles for Victor. I think that Nora was actually, we established her pretty quickly. You know, I think it was almost like a first draft type scenario. Victor had a lot more back and forth. You know, I think the version that I had was he was bald or had a buzz cut. I'm like, no, you don't understand, Lauren. This is perfect. This is who he is. And Lauren, I think it was Lauren's idea, and very rightly so, to say, I think he should have some hair. And so that's what we landed on.
So you and Lauren, you went back and forth with designing the characters and the world itself?
Yeah, we always go back and forth. You know, Lauren and I, and this was the reason why we pitched the book together, is because we love working together. I love Lauren. I think that she's one of the greatest writers I've ever worked with. I think she's one of the most generous and greatest collaborators I've ever worked with. I feel so lucky to have been her partner on this book and our last book. So we were halfway through Under the Moon when we were emailing back and forth asking if we could pitch again to DC. So Victor Nora was our pitch, and we pitched it over the phone during a Philadelphia comic convention. So I was at some Philadelphia comic book convention.
One?
Keystone Comic Con, it's called.
Was it last year?
Was it last year? I think it must have been 2 years ago. Yeah, it must have been 2 years ago at this point. It is funny. It was their inaugural convention. It's really funny. We were talking about Steve Orlando before we started recording, and we were just like getting drinks until like 4 a.m. with him. That guy can party. And I would just want everyone, if there's one takeaway from this podcast interview, is that Steve is a lot of fun. So we pitched that. I think I was just like pacing up and down the convention hallways Yeah, pitching this book like nervous, equal parts nervous and excited. But Mr. Freeze has always been one of my favorite characters. So we were talking about the looks of these characters on that phone call meeting, and one of the other things that we were talking about, you and I were talking about earlier, just a second ago, was the look of the setting, which was also very important to me. The backgrounds in Victor and Nora, I wanted them to be industrial and gothic and quirky, but also menacing. So I felt that Gotham, the most annoying Batman artist, when you ask them who their favorite Batman character is, they always say Gotham City, which is such an annoying answer. But, I think I did that a couple of times in my past too. And I get it, because Gotham is always portrayed differently with all these different artists. Jim Lee's Gotham City is way different than Anton Furst's Gotham City, who was my biggest inspiration. He designed Gotham City for the Tim Burton movies. Mm-hmm. And that Gotham City is a lot different from the David Mazzucchelli Gotham City, which is more like 1980s New York City. We've all seen the Chicago Gotham City from the Christopher Nolan movies. We've seen like a Victorian Gotham City and the Mike Mignola Gotham, the Art Deco Gotham from the Batman animated series. So I'm always looking to see who's doing like the futuristic one, who's doing the industrial one. It's so fascinating to see how that city is portrayed, And so that was a lot of thought did go into how we're going to present our version of Gotham City and how that's going to support our story and our love story and these two characters who are nice and loving, and how we're going to use the setting to show that there's impending doom. So we wanted it to look quirky, we wanted it to look fun, and we also wanted it to look a little bit scary.
So I know you were talking about Gotham. Have you ever, this is totally off topic, but have you ever had a chance to read Chip Kidd's Batman Death by Design?
No, but I am a fan of Chip Kidd. Why?
He did a Batman, just like an original graphic novel where he designed everything. That Gotham is, because it's like his design and like all the architecture and stuff. It is something else.
Wait, tell me the name of that again. What's the name of this book?
Sorry, I'm turning around to look at my bookshelf. It's Batman Death by Design. I was lucky enough to meet him, and he signed it.
That sounds right up my alley. I just wrote this down on a Post-it note for myself, so I'm definitely going to pick that up. I love Chip Kidd from of his, I have a great book of the toys of Batman that he designed. So I'm looking forward to reading that. I didn't know it existed. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, not many people. Everything is so beautiful. So yeah. Oh, man, I'm just so excited in this interview. Like hearing you so excited is just getting me so pumped, especially because like your Gotham is, especially with the coloring. I don't have the colorist's name on hand. I love the hues that all of Gotham has.
Mm-hmm. Well, the colorist, her name is Christiane Peter. She is so awesome, and she is she's one of my favorite collaborators as well. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just wanted to get her name out there.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure too, because I just didn't have it off the top of my head. But like this Gotham the whole book has a very unique color to it that I think matches that quirkiness of the book. Like these characters aren't your typical heartthrob leads. Like they're talking about death. They're talking about like these really hard to handle feelings they have, and showing the sensitivity, especially in Victor, is really well done through the art itself. When I don't remember where they're at, but he's like sitting on the curb, like having an episode because he's thinking about the other tragedy that happened in his life. Just things like that. Like, how are you trying to bring humanity to Victor with your art?
That's very kind of you to say, and I'm really glad that's how you read it. I do want to talk a little bit more about Chris Peter, who was so important in what you how you read that and those feelings that you were gleaning from her story. Her palette and her approach to color, it really did add a new level of feeling and emphasis. And her coloring is a storytelling device. When she colors these deep reds or these icy blues, you feel that even if it's not even if the reader isn't very conscious or aware of it, that's because of her. I love working with Chris. We work together. Sarah Miller, who is a great editor at DC, she paired me and Chris together on our Zatanna short, which was our first thing together. And now every time I work with a new editor on a new project, her name always comes up. One of us is always recommending her. She's great. She couldn't be easier to work with and smarter and more talented. She's awesome. And one of the early conversations with our book was our book, Victor and Nora, it's an alternating perspective story. So when we have Victor chapters, he is colored all in blue, and it's a monochromatic scale. And then when we tell the story through Nora's point of view, everything is warm and everything is red because that's her personality. She's vibrant and she's fiery and she's passionate. And then when these characters get together, it combines into this very nice purple color. Interestingly enough, at the very end, and this was not a conversation that any of us had, Chris, this is all Chris, and I am so impressed with her for it. At the climax of our story, she colors in this very deep royal blue and orange, this really fiery contrast, which adds this level of uncomfortability and danger that was all her. So I'm just forgive me for the tangent. I'm just so excited and so grateful for that and what she was able to do and the level of emotions that she was able to bring to the story. It is a very emotional story. And I need to give all the credit to not only Chris, but Lauren. This is Lauren's interpretation of the character. This was her approach. She created this version of Victor, and I did what I can to complement this new version of him. I really do feel like this is a new version of Victor before he started squashing down his feelings. We know him as this very stoic character in the cartoons and the movies and the comic books, but in our version, he's a little bit more nuanced, and you can see where he's going to go. You can see, the seeds of the character that he's going to become. But when he's younger, he's different. So that was our approach, and that was our initial thinking when it came to presenting this character.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went on that tangent because I've been a huge advocate for these the young adult original graphic novels because they're such a good place for new readers to start. Even they're not just for young. Like, I was very emotional reading this yesterday, mostly because I'm in love with them. But like, every one of these stories has sort of had their own color to it, and the thing that I've been thinking about since I read it is the purple. But now that you said the blue and when they come together, that's the purple. So Chris absolutely killed it with that. Like, it has stuck with me since I finished because I was like, oh, this purple, and I didn't even think of the meaning behind it. So your little tangent just gave me a whole nother level of understanding and respect for the book. So,
oh, that's great. That's so nice to hear. Thank you.
So, yeah, you said these characters aren't like the interpretation of Lauren, but I think you said that Nora hasn't really had much of a characterization pre Victor. So for a lack of a better term, she's really just been on ice for such a long time. What do you think this iteration of the character really brings to her and her lore?
Well, Nora is more than just motivation. She's been literally a woman in a refrigerator for a long time, or for most of the times that we've seen her. And again, if I'm wrong, please tweet at Isaac Goodhart. I am looking for recommendations because Mr. Freeze is, in fact, my favorite character. But the stories that I was aware of, she was just the reason that Mr. Freeze does what he does. And so Laura and I knew that Nora was her own person, and it was up to Lauren to really figure out who is she and what are her goals, because we know that she's not just this is Lauren's term that I'm borrowing, who I believe borrowed this from Kelly Sue DeConnick. She's not just a sexy lamp. She's not just an object. She's a real person, well, a fictional person with goals and with desires and opinions, and so our questions that we were asking in the very early stages of putting this book together were: who is she? Is she the perfect angel that Mr. Freeze always told Batman she is? Did she always agree with Victor, or did she sometimes disagree with him? And what were those conversations like? Where did she differ from him? Did she want to be frozen? Did she not want to be frozen? Did she not want to live forever? How controlling is Victor over her life? These are very interesting, fascinating questions that we were asking, and that I always wanted to know, and that I believe a lot of fans are going to be interested in learning about as they read the book. I certainly was. When Lauren sent me the script, it was so much better than I could have hoped for. I just loved it. And I thought her approach to Nora was so unique and interesting and nuanced and really beautiful. So I really hope that other people will agree when they read the book.
Sorry, I'm so caught up in how excited I am to hear all of that. And there is something that we haven't touched on yet, and I think it is a very important part of the book, and it's Nora's illness and the representation of it through the Bird of Portent. I'm so excited to hear that name, because the bad omens. But with your art, there's a sort of body horror to it, because there's scenes where this bird morphs into something horrific. What was your inspiration behind all of that?
That was, again, I have to throw to Lauren. I would love to take credit for this and go, that was all me. I am an artist and I am a genius. But the truth is, that was Lauren, and thank you for asking that question. But early on in the script, that's the description. Everything that I drew in the early pages, where you see this bird, this hallucination, this physical representation of Nora's illness, that is 100% Lauren's very detailed description. And so, however, I will say that, again, because I worked on this book for 8 months, and I'm constantly trying to make every page better than the page preceding it. The way that the bird is represented really evolves throughout the 180 pages of the story. So when we first see the bird, it looks the way that it does, and you'll have to buy the book and read it to see what I'm talking about. But then towards the end, again, I'm using different materials, and I wanted to make it more as Nora's illness worsens and takes over her capabilities more, the bird becomes more ethereal. And I wanted to show that with big, broad, loose brushstrokes. And so I have a big, fat inking brush, and I'm just slapping down ink on a paper and then scanning it in and using that as sort of a mixed media thing. And I'm hoping that readers will feel that the bird, because I'm inking it the way that I'm inking and we're presenting it the way that we're presenting it, that it feels like it's coming from a different place, that it feels out of place in this comic. And so when you last see the bird, the last appearance of it, not in the climax, but when Nora has her most severe episode with Victor, it's scary and it's a monster. And I drew that with all different materials. I think there's like some pastel and whiteout and an acrylic paint. We were just trying everything, just throwing everything. I like took a toothbrush and I put ink on a toothbrush and I'm like flicking it on the page, and that's where you get a lot of the messy dots and spatters on there. So that was the inspiration, is just to make it as weird and disturbing as we could. You know, we wanted it to feel scary because that's how Nora feels. So how do we show that she's scared? And I just want to throw everything at the wall and make it as uncomfortable and weird, which I felt when I was drawing it. You know, I don't use these materials. So I'm hoping that that feeling and that approach will translate to readers.
I hope so too, because the whole page is breathtaking, but it's also very scary because it's a representation of this illness and what she's going through, and it sucks because it's young love being oof. So instead of ending on such a downer, we have another question we always ask. If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
Oh my God. That's right. I forgot all about this question. I suppose if I had one, I saw like a Looney Tunes cartoon where some character is just going through and it's like dressing the character and brushing its teeth and getting it ready for the day. I am such a slow riser. Please give me one of those machines to just get me ready for the day. Alarm, and then the bed tilts me off of it and I go down a slide and these robot hands just dress me and brush my teeth and put me together. And by the time I land on the first floor, I'm ready for the day. If we could have that, if we could get the best engineers and get the guys who do all those OK Go music videos to create that for me, then I feel like the world would be a better place.
Well, Isaac, it was nice to have you.
Bravo, sir. Well done.
You're welcome. So do you have any projects coming up that you wanted to plug, or you probably...
I do have new projects. Some are already drawn and all are yet to be announced. Okay. But if you like Victor and Nora, if you liked Under the Moon, A Catwoman Tale, there are a couple of very cool announcements that are coming very soon. So stay tuned. I'm Isaac Goodhart on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. And I'm also at Isaac Goodhart on Twitter, and I'm less active on there, but I always read everything and I try to respond to everyone. So when those projects get announced, that's where I'll be posting about that. And I'm really, really looking forward to the new stuff. It's going to be really cool.
Awesome. I'm very excited as well. So, you know where to find us on Twitter at GateCrashersPod, on Instagram as GateCrashersPod, and we'll see you soon.